everyone. I hope that you are all doing well. I've just finished reading over your discussion posts, and I just want to say that you did a really excellent job jumping into this topic. As I mentioned last week, this is a case study that is based on a personal experience that I had when I was at the University of Georgia, and I'm not Jasmine in this situation, but one of my close colleagues was. Um, if any of you, and I know some of you do, have the opportunity to work in a Title I school, you know that there are students who have really unique and awesome strengths, and there's also a lot of need. But not any more need than all other students. It just looks different at times. Um, what I was most impressed with is that several of you progressed beyond giving like the real idealistic textbook answer and started to really think, wait a second, what would we actually do? So in this situation, it's tempting to just propose the perfect solution and say, well, I'll just talk to the principal and tell them that it's really important that we see gifted students in all backgrounds and that giftedness is diverse and that we all have unique strengths. But what does that really look like on Tuesday afternoon? That's my goal for this class. It's not that you memorize definitions or theories, but what does it look like at the end of the week? You've been working all week, there's students screaming in the hallway. What does it look like then? So I was particularly just impressed to see you guys taking that next step. Particularly, Diana did a good job talking through how it can be a little dangerous as an intern to come in and say, well, this is what I know, and teachers who may be practicing for a while could be easily offended by that. Blair also did a good job kind of unpacking that and discussing potential ways to gradually bring things up in terms of making like that one-page flyer that it had you make. That was done with a purpose. Posting that in the teacher workroom. I liked everyone's discussions of attitude. Larissa did a good job mentioning equity versus equality and not assuming that gifted students in one school will look the same and be served the same as gifted students in another school. The big theme that we're getting from all of your discussion posts, as well as the library materials, is the importance of mindset, the importance of teacher attitude, and even more so, the importance of administrator attitude. Sarah did a good job unpacking what we call school-related factors, and the attitude of the administration is going to trickle down into the attitude of the teachers, and then that trickles out into the students and also the community. So if you think about the principal having an attitude of let's close the achievement gap, let's just get these students, quote, caught up, then that's really going to be doing a disservice to our students who may be not appropriately challenged. So in terms of changing attitude, I appreciated several of you mentioning that this cannot happen overnight, and that's very true. If Jasmine walks in with her data and her project that she did as a graduate student and says, we're going to start doing gifted education today, then she's really not going to make lasting change. I believe Diana said she probably won't see change within her time at her internship. So this needs to be a long-term effort. And in terms of gifted education, it's easy to get frustrated when we don't see really big changes, but I don't want those the lack of big change to make you not try to make small changes. So what can Jasmine do in her specific classroom? Several of you mentioned if Jasmine shows that positive attitude and shows those high expectations, then the students are likely to rise up to meet those expectations. Another thing that Jasmine could do is show the students past student work or mentors' work, examples of students from their background, from their socioeconomic status, people that they can see themselves in and recognize that they also have the opportunity to achieve. A lot of times when we just give basic materials, we're not being very culturally responsive. And issues in terms of underrepresentation in gifted ed are not limited to identification. So we want to be careful. Are we just focused on identification, but then not considering the services that we are providing? There are a lot of issues with attrition in gifted ed where students, oftentimes students of color, do not want to be in gifted education programs because there is a pressure of what we call being white, and they don't see themselves in the gifted programs. So they actually can purposely try not to be placed into those programs. So I do want to emphasize, I think this case study did focus on identification of students from diverse backgrounds, but we can't focus on identification without also carefully aligning that to appropriate services. Many of you mentioned that giftedness looks different in all students. I love the tabs tool for that specific reason. I also like how it mentions the negative manifestations of giftedness. One thing to be careful of, if we are identifying students with diverse talents, artistic talents and musical talents and mathematical talent, and then also physical talent, can we provide the actual services that are aligned to those talents? I think that Larissa did a good job thinking of some practical ways to get started. I loved her suggestion for clubs related to the teacher's interests, a cooking club, various other interests that the teachers can be providing the students an opportunity for enrichment. That standing alone would not be fully appropriate for gifted education services, but it's a start. So that enrichment can provide the appropriate educational environment for students to start demonstrating their growth and demonstrating their gifts. One thing that I want to make very clear is the interaction between a student's gifts and talents and their environment. So particularly in terms of socioeconomic status, students who come from higher income families are given so many more opportunities when they are very young. They have more books in the home. They have most likely adults who are reading to them. They have opportunities to go to camps during the summer. They visit museums on the weekends. All of those things cost money and time. Then, if we have a student who may come from a lower socioeconomic background, there are fewer resources monetarily to have those books in the classroom or at the home. There's fewer resources to take those museum trips. We have quite often parents who are super dedicated to their kids, but they're working 3 jobs to put food on the table, so they don't have the time to read to their children. They don't have the time to take them on those field trips and those outings that could be providing the appropriate context. So giftedness does not exist in a vacuum. Sorry, my computer is slipping. Giftedness really depends on the context. So oftentimes, students cannot demonstrate their gifts unless they are placed in the appropriate challenging context. So it could be, such as Larissa mentioned, we're giving these students more enrichment opportunities that will provide the context for them to demonstrate their growth and demonstrate their talents. Several of you mentioned the danger of relying on just a single test score. In terms of reliability and validity, that's definitely not good practice. There is a plethora of evidence of bias in standardized tests, and we need to be careful about that. So it's a difficult challenge, and I just wanted to make sure that we touched base in terms of, yes, there needs to be overall school-wide change, district change, I think cultural change in terms of what we define as giftedness, but that doesn't mean that you can't make a change tomorrow. That doesn't mean that you can't start challenging your students or demonstrating a different perspective or different assumption about their abilities. So this class is a constant juxtaposition between big change and small change, and they really rely upon each other. Okay, so moving on from our discussion post into our assignment for this week. So this week's assignment is a little different. It's a little bit more creative than others. It is a writing assignment, but I like it because it challenges you to think about what it's like to be one of these students who could potentially be invisible in terms of gifted education. So this assignment is called the See Me statement, and it's basically um, a letter that you are writing from the perspective of a gifted child who may be invisible. This letter is basically their opportunity to express, I'm gifted, this is why, but you don't see me, and this is how I wish you could support me. This is an assignment that takes some thought. Yes, I am looking for evidence of research. Yes, I am looking for evidence that you have already read the library materials, but not in the sense of you're adding citations or you're including quotations or quotes rather. What I'm looking for is you to think, how would all of this feel? If I were a student who was gifted, but I always got ISS because I didn't have my materials, and then I just got tired of all my teachers telling me I wasn't prepared, so I just didn't try anymore. What would that feel like? How may I demonstrate my gifts if I come from a family that kind of moves from one hotel room to the next every night, and I'm not ever fully there, but I can sometimes show my gifts in the way that I misbehave? Or how might I show my gifts as an English language learner? So in terms of this assignment, your first task is to decide, who do you want to become? Do you want to become a student who may be from an impoverished background? Do you want to become a twice exceptional student? Anything that you would like. The challenge is to choose a student that you would like to kind of think about in more detail. So within this letter, the first thing you're doing is providing a clear description of who you are. So make it really clear, what are your unique characteristics? What's your name? Where do you live? Who do you live with? Paint a picture of that student who would traditionally be underrepresented in gifted education. After you paint the picture of who you are, give me evidence that you are gifted. That doesn't mean you copy the definition of giftedness into the letter. It means you tell me, my teachers keep telling me to put my notebook away, but I can't stop writing poetry because I'm just trying to express what it's like at home. Oh, there's a lot of things to unpack there in terms of tabs. Or I get in trouble all the time because I kept asking questions in third grade, so I just decided to sleep through fourth grade. All right, that's evidence of giftedness, and those details are showing me that you have done the research. So a clear description, evidence that you are gifted. Tell me the challenges that you face as that student. What is challenging in your daily life at school? And finally, I want you to end this with a cry for support. What do you want from that teacher? Yes, you want to be identified as gifted, but you want more than that. I want the teacher to understand me. I want the teacher to challenge me. So think specifically, as that student, what would you want the teacher, the school, the administrators to provide? So just to recap, four different components. We're looking for a clear description of the student, evidence that he or she is gifted and or talented, challenges he or she faces, and a cry out for support and what that may look like. You do not have to provide citations for this assignment, but it should be clear that you are basing this work on the research that we have already covered last week. Make sure you write from the perspective of the gifted child. This is more of a creative assignment, an opportunity for you to really take on the perspective of someone else, and it provides a good jump in for our discussion on creativity, which we will start next week. Okay, I am always here if you have any questions, and I appreciate your hard work.